Hello to everyone, and I am Dr. B Kumar, and I'll introduce the approach to prepare for this component of general studies, which is ecology and environment, where you know that ecology, environment related concepts are part of the preliminary examination as well as the mains. Of course, in mains, the specific topics have been listed out. Specific titles have also been given so that students have a clear understanding of what is in store in ecology and environment for them in mains. And along with those topics which have been laid down very clearly in the syllabus for your mains, it is also true that whatever you do in terms of basics of ecology and environment is always relevant to the mains examination as well. Before I talk about any particular topic, just remember, when it is prelims, fundamental concepts of ecology and environment, current developments, which are reported in the newspapers, when I refer to these current developments, these are some environmental, ecological issues which are being discussed, debated in the papers. You know, like, for example, in the recent times, you've been reading a lot about the hazards associated with the use of plastics and plastic pollution. So, over the last 2 weeks or even 3 weeks, you've been continuously reading about plastics, hazards associated with plastics, the pollution, how the marine ecosystems and even land-based ecosystems are increasingly being threatened because of the use of plastics, particularly disposable plastics, which are called single-use plastics. If you look at the coverage given in the media to this issue, it is very clear that we could always have some question on this particular topic of plastics, plastic pollution, mains, or even the prelims that is going to come about next year. The next year preliminary examination, in all likelihood, will have a question or two on this topic or related at least to this topic. So contemporary things like, urban floods, for example, we were always aware that urban flood is an important topic for a question for the mains, because urban floods have been discussed right from 2015 December because of flooding in Chennai city, the Madras floods 2015. And if you go back in time, the floods in the town or in the towns surrounding the core city of Bombay, including floods in Bombay city 2005 because of heavy monsoonal rainfall. What factors contribute to this urban flooding always was a potential question for us in the examination, either for prelims or for mains. It came in mains last year. Topics like urban flooding, landslides, all these things, of course, which also overlap with geography. They are, part of your concepts in geography, part of your concepts in basic ecology, environment. There is no neat line separating them. These are always questions for us in the examination, prelims, mains, like that. So when I talk about current developments, I'm talking about these kinds of contemporary issues. It is relevant for prelims, it is relevant for mains. Prelims, the trend is, if you've perhaps seen the questions that have actually come in the examination in the last few years, the trend has been to frame questions around some basic principles of ecology, ecosystems, environment, and basic concepts. So, about 1/3, sometimes 40% of the questions will touch basic concepts. And the 20% to 15% of the total number of questions in ecology and environment, you've seen the trend is to ask some fact. These are fact-based questions. And balance of the questions that have been coming from issues in ecology environment being debated now, which are being continuously highlighted by the media, which are contemporary developments. Okay. So this is how you have to approach this subject for prelims. You have to be very clear in your basic concepts and principles. And for mains, your approach should be to always be on the alert for issues which are being continuously debated in the media, where that particular issue is of relevance, concern to India also, or if it's an international environmental issue or concern having implications for India as well, or it is purely a development which affects India. Please also remember that your concepts in ecology and environment will overlap with concepts in geography and some concepts in disaster management. For example, how should one deal with disaster management strategy when it's a natural disaster like a tropical cyclone? You need to know why and how tropical cyclones develop, what are the areas that they affect, what is the kind of damage that they bring about. When all these things you understand as part of your physical geography related concepts. Disaster management, what will be your disaster management strategy when it's a tropical cyclone as a natural calamity which has affected a region? The strategy will definitely have some link to the causes for the tropical cyclones, the nature of consequences that are created because of the effect of the tropical cyclones. So your disaster management response will draw upon your understanding of the knowledge of how tropical cyclones develop, what are their travel tracks, which regions they affect, what kind of harm they bring about. So there is no such clear line that would separate ecology, geography, disaster management. It's always best to have an integrated, holistic understanding of all these areas. What are the sources that you're supposed to consult? NCERT, all titles relevant to ecology, environment, like for example, from 6th standard to nearly 12th standard. I am suggesting that you start with the 6th standard textbooks of NCERT dealing with ecosystem, ecology, environment concepts because you need to understand the terms very clearly. If you're comfortable with the terms, then you'll become very, very clear about the concepts and the manner in which ecosystem principles and procedures work. That is the reason why I said please start reading right from 6th standard so that you're very, very comfortable with the terms, the phrases, the most basic principles. So there are many different simple books that are part of ecology and environment which have been published by the NCERT, like Man and Environment, like Our Environment. So I suggest you go through them. If you want to refer to a standard textbook which deals with, ecology environment as a full-fledged applied science, then maybe you can do some selective study of this book called Environment Introduction to Environment Ecology. It is Introduction to Environment Ecology by P.D. Sharma. But you have to be very, very selective in your study because it's a regular textbook. A lot of things are discussed in great detail. You have to only be on the lookout for some basic principles and concepts, which is why I said you first do NCERT, then maybe if it is required, you can start selectively referring to this book for some, further, what we call information, illustrations, concepts based on the basics. So, Introduction to Ecology and Environment, P.D. Sharma. There are many other such books, but NCERT, the best books to start with. Now, in mains, so in prelims you are going to be sure of the basics in mains. Please remember it is contemporary issues which have been getting most of the questions. Current developments, current issues which are being talked about regularly in the newspapers, of international concern, national concern. These are the ones which are usually questions these days in the mains. Urban flooding, the role of Antarctica, 2017 mains question, the role of Antarctica in the global climatic balance in the context of climate change, global warming, melting of ice sheets, like that. So mains is clearly all about contemporary developments, present issues. Prelims is generally about basic concepts and their application and some fact-based questions like, for example, some species of wildlife, some national parks, some sanctuaries, like that. To touch upon some basics of ecology and environment, as an introduction to the subject, briefly. I'll be spending some time today itself on some basic concepts of ecology so that you are being introduced to what could be the overall content of the subject. We all know that ecology is an applied science. It's an applied science. The reason being, various ecological phenomena, various environmental processes that work. They work on the basis of laws that are part of geography, whereas geography itself is an applied science, to be honest. So they work on the basis of laws of biology, of geography, of physics, of chemistry, and here and there with a little bit of mathematics involved because of mathematical modeling. So when you're applying the principles and laws of biology or physics or geography or chemistry, to a certain extent chemistry, you always call that field of study which is borrowing laws, principles from other sciences as an applied science. So we know that ecology is an applied science. What does it deal with as an applied science? Ecology as an applied science deals with, at a very basic level, it deals with the interrelationships, interactions, it deals with the interrelationships, interactions between life forms and their environments or their habitats. I can always write this as habitats also. You know that habitat is the physical environment for the living of a species. So when you refer to the physical environment of a species or a life form, it's a habitat. It is a habitat for the living of that species, of that life form. Well, this is what ecology is concerned with. These interrelationships, these interactions with their outcomes, with their consequences, is what is supposed to be the subject matter of this applied science called ecology. And the term ecology was actually coined by this German biologist called Haeckel, Haeckel. Haeckel was the German biologist who coined the term ecology. Okay? Another very, very important environmental scientist or ecologist called E.P. Odum. His idea is that ecology is the study of the structure and function of ecosystems. Ecology is the study of the structure and function of the ecosystems. That is the idea of E.P. Odum. And again, to just tell you a few things about how ecology developed. It was the Darwinian theory of evolution. After he published this book called The Origin of Species in 1859, that ecology began to acquire a lot of strength because a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas of modern ecology are part of the different concepts and principles discussed in The Origin of Species of Darwin. Okay. This is the meaning of ecology environment. Well, let us have a look at some what are called fundamental concepts of ecology. The fundamental concepts of ecology. The first fundamental concept of ecology. All life forms and their environments are mutually reactive. All life forms and their environments are mutually reactive. Meaning there is reciprocal interaction between the life forms, their environments. Environments affect life forms affect environments. The physical environment is affected by the activity of the life form in the form of habitats undergoing changes, and this interaction of the life form with its physical environment leads to some changes in the physiological and the functional characteristics of the life form itself. That is the meaning we are going to give to this fundamental principle, which declares that life forms and their environments are mutually reactive. Number two, the second fundamental concept of ecology is holism in the organization of the ecosystem. Holism in the organization of the ecosystem. What this means is ecosystems are organized at different levels. Each level is a whole by itself. What are these levels in the organization of the ecosystem? where you conceive of each level as a whole by itself. And of course, the levels, as you go down from lower levels of organization to the higher levels of organization, these lower levels merge into higher levels to create new holistic systems at the higher levels. There is always this kind of integration. At the highest level of organization of the ecosystems, we have the biosphere. At the highest level of organization, the biosphere. Biosphere is an abstract entity. Biosphere is not present by itself as a separate, tangible component on the Earth's surface. It is not going to be present as an exclusive, separate, tangible entity on the Earth's surface. We conceive of the biosphere in abstract terms. We see the biosphere here, it lives here in our mind. Our concept of biosphere is an abstract concept. Any concept that is an abstract concept lives in the mind of man. It is not physically present. It is not tangible. You cannot touch it like that. So what is this biosphere? All gaseous material of planet Earth, the atmosphere, all water bodies make up the hydrosphere, and all solid material, including rocks, soils, are part of the lithosphere. We know this. Life forms, they extract material from the lithosphere to carry out their functions, to live. They extract material from the hydrosphere. Water, for example, is used by life forms as part of their life processes, as part of their metabolic activities. And of course, life forms also extract material from the atmosphere in the form of oxygen, in the form of carbon dioxide. So if this is the atmosphere, which can be identified in tangible terms as a distinct layer of the earth, if this is another distinct tangible layer in the form of the hydrosphere, including all the water bodies that are part of planet Earth. And if this is the lithosphere, made up of rocks, soils, then we can conceive of an abstract layer that lives here, which forms because of the intersection of these three layers. I am not saying the intersection is actually present on the Earth's surface as a separate, distinctive entity. No. We see that intersection because we know that life forms get their material from atmosphere, lithosphere, and hydrosphere. And this region of overlap, we are creating in abstract terms life forms are extracting material from the atmosphere, are extracting material from the hydrosphere, are extracting material from the lithosphere, creating this entity called the biosphere. That is the biosphere. We can conceive of organization of the ecosystems at this highest level called the biosphere, meaning we can see biosphere itself as one huge ecosystem. Then we can look at the next level of organization below biosphere. Below biosphere, we have the biome. So it is biosphere at a slightly lower level, the biome. What is this biome? Biosphere is made up of a series of biomes. Biome is the largest recognizable division, spatial division of the terrestrial surface or the aquatic, realm. The largest recognizable physical subdivision, I'll put it this way, physical subdivision, of the Earth's land surface and of the Earth's hydrosphere of the Earth's land surface and of the Earth's hydrosphere is the biome. This biome in reality is made up of a series of different ecosystems. We see the biome sometimes as one ecosystem at that level of resolution. It is we who are deciding to see the biome as an ecosystem because we want to understand the overall personality of the biome, the overall structure of the biome. You can always break it down into a series of smaller ecosystems that is going to be the next lower level of resolution. It is we who are resolving the biome into a series of ecosystems because that is our scale of resolution. So, biomes are actually collections of ecosystems, but we can always see biome as one complete whole. A separate level of organization of the Earth's ecosystem. Biosphere, biome, ecosystem. At the next level of resolution, the ecosystem itself. You know that an ecosystem is a collection of different communities of life forms, along with their physical environments, where the collection of these different life forms organized into different communities, along with their physical environments which are habitats, will also include, this collection will also include, if you want to call it the ecosystem, will also include the interrelationships, the interdependencies between different life forms of these different communities on one hand, along with the interrelationships and the interdependencies between the life forms, as a whole on one hand, with their physical environment on the other. So, ecosystem is this interdependent system, or it refers to the life forms and their physical environments within an interdependent and an interrelated framework. So, this interrelated, interdependent framework, which brings or which includes within its fold, which includes within itself a series of different life forms along with their physical environments, into an interdependent, interrelated framework is the ecosystem. Which means the ecosystem is a discrete, a separate. Discrete means D-I-S-C-R-E-T-E, a discrete, a separate unit within the biosphere. It's a separate, discrete unit of the biosphere, where you see the ecosystem as made up of a series of different communities of life forms along with their physical environments, with the interdependencies and the interrelationships between every element which is part of it. That is the ecosystem. We are going to deal with ecosystems, structure, functions, and different types of ecosystems as we go forward into the subject. I am just talking about the basic terms, the basic concepts of ecology to begin with. At the next level of organ below the ecosystem, you have the community. What is a community? It's a collection of populations of different species of life. Different species. A collection of populations of different species of life will make up a community. A community includes many members belonging to different species of life. Well, okay. So a lot of different species of life will create a community as the level of organization below the ecosystem, and after the community you have population as the next level of organization. Population refers to all individual members of a given species of life. Population of man is made up of all different human beings as part of the human species. So all these different people who are part of a single species called the human species will make up the population of man. Communities are made up of such populations. That is the next level of organization. Biosphere, biome, come in your ecosystem, community, population, and then At the lowest level of organization, you have the individual, who represents one member of a given species. The single member of a given species is a functioning whole by himself. He is a functioning whole by himself. He is complete. Within him, there is a complete system which is in operation with a series of processes and procedures. So we see this individual as another, whole, W-H-O-L-E, as another whole. Well, this is another basic concept of ecology. Holism. Organization of ecosystems into different levels, where each level is seen as a complete whole by itself. Third basic concept of ecology. Adaptation. Life forms have this adaptation. Adaptation is the capacity of any species to adjust with the physical environment for survival and for proper functioning, so that it is in complete harmony. It's in complete equilibrium with its habitat. That is adaptation. When life forms migrate from one region to another, habitats change. Because our life form has migrated from one region to another where habitats have changed, it develops some coping mechanisms which are temporary, which are not permanent, which are not passed on to its offspring, which in biological terms you have always understood as the phenotype, P-H-E-N-O-T-Y-P-E, phenotype. These coping mechanisms are physiological, they are psychological. If it is higher levels of life forms, they are psychological as well. These coping mechanisms, which are physiological, by which this life form is able to live in harmony with its habitat, is able to survive with a reasonably high degree of comfort, is able to survive with a reasonably high degree of comfort. In other words, without stress, is adaptation. Adaptation reflects the dynamic interaction and exchange between life forms and their environment. The reciprocal interaction between the environment and the life forms, by which there is some exchange also, is reflected in this concept called adaptation. Another basic term that you're going to come across in ecology is plasticity of the species. Species plasticity. The capacity of a life form to structurally and physiologically, in fact, plasticity of the species leads to adaptation. You'll realize that. Adaptation is an outcome of plasticity. Life forms have plasticity, which means they have the capacity to, you know, develop certain structural as well as physiological mechanisms so that they are completely adjusted to their physical environment. That is plasticity. Okay? It is this plasticity which is the capacity of the life form to develop certain structural responses, adjustments, some physiological responses, adjustments, so that they're able to, you know, comfortably live within their habitats by adjusting to the physical environment is the one which is going to lead to adaptation. This is another basic concept. Species of life always have this flexibility called plasticity. Okay? Another basic concept is ECAD. ECADs of species. ECAD is a concept relevant to plant species, and ECAD refers to a population of individual plants which belong to the same genetic stock. They have the same genetic composition, genetic material, but their vegetative characteristics are different. That is called an ECAD. So ECAD refers to plant species. It's a population of plant species where the individuals making up this population have the same genetic stock, but they differ in their physiological characteristics, their vegetative characteristics, like, the shape of the leaves, the size of the plant, the number of leaves, the structure of the stems, the kind of branching, and so on. Please remember, ECAD reflects the effect of that on the life form, which is our plant species. ECADs are results of environmental effect. These variations that I've just mentioned to you, leaf, shape, structure, the stem structure, the size of the plant being different, these are variations. Variations are a reference to the size of the plant being different, the shapes of leaves being different, the structure of stems, the structure of trunks, in other words, being different. These variations are environmentally produced. They are produced because of environmental stress. Because they are produced by environmental stress, they are part of the phenotype. They are temporary. They are reversible. ECADs are temporary and reversible. Whether they are environmentally introduced or induced, externally induced. Okay? Which means that one type of ECAD can change into another type of ECAD with a change in the environmental conditions. Isn't it? One type of ECAD can change into another type of ECAD with change in environmental conditions. What is the concept of an ecotype? What is the concept of an ecotype? Ecotype implies A population of life forms, a population of life forms of a given species only, where the individuals have differences in their genetic makeup. All right. They have differences in the genetic makeup. They will also have differences in their physiological characteristics. They also have, of course, differences in their genetic makeup. So, the different individuals of a given population of a given species have differences in their genetic makeup. They do not have this, they do not have the same genetic stock. That is a concept called ecotype. Well, it is these differences in the genetic makeup of the different individuals making up the population called the ecotype. Yes, it is these genetic differences which are responsible for the variation of their physical characteristics. Like for example, in the human species, skin color, the color of eyes, the physical structure itself in terms of stature meaning height, the texture of hair, these are because of genetic factors. Hence, the concept of ecotype implies that these variations which are because of genetic differences are permanent, they are not reversible. Ecotype, the variations in the characteristics across different individuals of a given population of species are permanent, they are irreversible. There is a concept of ecotype. Okay? Then you have one more basic concept in ecology which is called the ecological niche. The ecological niche. Very simply, the ecological niche refers to the location of a particular species of life in the food chain. It is simply the location of a particular species of life in the food chain, where the food chain is made up of different species of life, and you know that these different species of life are related to each other on the basis of predator-prey relations. Predator-prey relations. The prey is the food for the predator, which is the attacker. It is these predator-prey relations which are going to define the functional relations between different life forms in a food chain. Where exactly is a given species located in the food chain is the address of that species in the food chain, and that address of the species in the food chain is called the ecological niche. All right, its location, and the ecological niche of a species also defines. All of you remember the ecological niche of a species also defines the functional role of that species in a community of life forms. It defines that ecological niche defines the functional role of that particular species in a community of species, meaning how it is related to other life forms via predator-prey relations. How is it related to other life forms making up that food chain in terms of predator-prey relations? That is the functional role that we are talking about. The functional role is in terms of predator-prey relations. So the ecological niche of a particular species of life in a food chain will define, its predator, its prey relations with other species of life. In other words, it's a predator in terms of some life forms in the food chain. It's a prey. It is food for some other life forms in the same food chain. It's a predator, meaning some life forms are food for it. It is prey for other life forms. It is food for some other life forms in the same food chain. That is the meaning of functional role of a given species of life is being defined by the ecological niche. Very well. When different species of life, all right, when different species of life, different organisms occupy similar ecological niches, when they occupy similar ecological niches in different geographic regions, when different life forms, organisms occupy similar ecological niches, but in different geographic regions, these life forms are referred to as ecological equivalents. They are referred to as ecological equivalents. So, well, when different life forms occupy similar ecological niches but in different geographic regions, they are called ecological equivalents. One more basic concept of ecology is ecosystems, are related by ecotones also. Ecotones. The concept of an ecotone. Ecotone is the region of transition. The region of transition meaning it's a spatial unit on the Earth's surface. Can be identified. It's a spatial unit on the Earth's surface where this spatial unit is the region of transition where one community is slowly changing into another community of life forms. Where one community of life forms is slowly being replaced by another community of life forms, this region, which is a definite spatial unit, where one community of life forms is slowly changing into another community of life forms is called the ecotone. Ecotones, themselves have the status of geographic regions because they are spatial units. That is the concept of ecotone as another basic concept in ecology. Okay. What is the concept of a bioclimatic frontier? A bioclimatic frontier. If you want to understand the concept of bioclimatic frontier, you should first understand the simple principle that physical factors of the environment like moisture, heat, sunlight, wind, these physical factors of the environment like number of hours of sunshine, the intensity of sunshine, and therefore the availability of heat, winds, their speeds, the water and the moisture content, they have an effect on the distribution of plant and animal life. They affect the spatial distribution of animal and plant life. Isn't it? Since these elements of the physical environment, which are actually elements of climate, these are actually elements of climate, which affect the distribution, spatial distribution of life forms. The idea is there are tolerance limits. There are tolerance limits where life forms can tolerate a range of temperatures, for example, as one physical element of climate. A given life form X is able to live, let's imagine, within a given range of temperatures which define the tolerance limits, the upper tolerance limit, the lower tolerance limit. Let's imagine this tolerance limits take the form of it can live when temperatures are between 25 degrees centigrade to something like, let's imagine, 40 degrees centigrade. If the temperatures go beyond 40 degrees centigrade, it will be very difficult for the life form to survive because it is now directly stressed. If the temperature is to below 25, it again is stress, climatic stress. The species, this particular life form will not be able to therefore live and survive if the temperature goes above 40 degrees centigrade or the temperature drops to below 25 degrees centigrade. These mark the limits of, these limits of tolerance. The lower limit of tolerance, the upper limit of tolerance. Okay? Now, the point is, the geographic region or the spatial unit, the geographic region or the spatial unit, which has these range of temperatures and not beyond them. So, a spatial unit or a geographic region where the temperatures are generally between 25 degrees centigrade and 40 degrees centigrade, where the temperatures do not significantly go above 40 and go below 25. That geographic region, that spatial region is called the bioclimatic frontier. Alright? If you have really understood the meaning of this bioclimatic frontier, you must have easily understood the idea that bioclimatic frontiers function as geographic boundaries for the distribution of a particular species. Because beyond these geographic regions, the tolerance limits have been exceeded. The tolerance limits have been exceeded. The species will not be able to survive. Therefore, the species is able to live in that geographic region within these tolerance limits. So, that geographic region, for example, something like this, that geographic region, this geographic region, the range of temperatures, in our example, between 25 degrees centigrade to 40 degrees centigrade, is the region over which you are going to find the distribution of a particular species, let us say X. That is a bioclimatic frontier. These bioclimatic frontiers, the borders of this geographic region are bioclimatic frontiers. This is a bioclimatic frontier, this is another bioclimatic frontier. These bioclimatic frontiers, which are borders of geographic regions, which include the tolerance limits for a particular species, they function as what? They function as limits, spatial of course, spatial limits for for the distribution of a species. That is how one is supposed to understand the meaning of a bioclimatic frontier. So, well, I guess I will stop here. This being the introductory class, this was only to demonstrate to you how we are supposed to develop our concepts in ecology by building from the basic principles, basic concepts. So I've discussed with you a few basic concepts of ecology. We will discuss a few more before we begin to explore different titles and topics in ecology and environment. So please start reading NCERT basic books before we, begin to, read higher textbooks, regular textbooks. You start with NCERT. I'll be dealing with a few more basic concepts of ecology in the next class, and after that only I'll begin my reviews and discussions of certain definite principles and concepts in ecology. We'll stop here for today. Thank you.